Hello, my name is Casey Clark, and today I will be talking about a critical incident involving a 10-year-old girl named Sarah Murnagam. And Sarah in 2013 was battling cystic fibrosis, and her parents were originally told that she would have months to live, and she was on a waiting list to receive a pediatric lung transplant. However, she found out that she only actually had a few weeks instead of a couple months to live. And it is very hard to find a set of lungs from a child. So there are a lot more available lungs for transplants for adults. However, there is a rule in the United States that children under 12 years old cannot obtain a lung transplant with adult lungs. They can only receive pediatric lungs. So, given that Sarah only had a couple weeks, it was very, very unlikely that she would receive a set of lungs within a couple weeks that came from a child. So, her parents, this case took place in Pennsylvania, and her parents they went to court and they ended up being successful in allowing Sarah to receive a lung transplant from an adult instead of a child. So I will be looking at 4 different ethical principles in this case, and the first is going to be autonomy. So autonomy is respecting an individual's right to make their own decision. In this case, Sarah did want a lung transplant from adult. However, it should be analyzed that her decision was not impacted by her parents or by the healthcare providers in this situation. To be a truly autonomous choice, Sarah would have to make that decision of her wanting the lung transplant from an adult without the influence of extraneous factors. So the next ethical principle I will be looking at is beneficence, which is respecting an individual's well-being. And in this case, so beneficence is an active principle. So by intervening and giving Sarah the lung transplant from an adult instead of a child, beneficence was maintained and was increased. If this intervention did not happen, beneficence in this case would be very low because there would be no intervention and Sarah would ultimately most likely end up not living. So the next principle I will look at is non-maleficence, which is avoiding doing harm, and refraining from actions that may place others at risk. So non-maleficence is a passive principle, which means that there is nothing actively being done. So if Sarah did not receive the lung transplant from an adult, the non-maleficence would have been higher, and this can be justified by looking at this principle in the aspect of not providing Sarah if we were to provide Sarah with a lung transplant from an adult, the adult population would have one less lung to be transplanted on an adult who needs it. So therefore, by giving this to a different population, we are actually increasing the risk of adults not receiving a lung transplant if they need one. So by intervening and giving the lung to Sarah, we're also placing others at risk who might need the lung in the adult population. The last principle I will look at is justice, and in this case, justice was upheld. So if Sarah was not given a lung from the adult population, then she would have been discriminated against because of her age, because they would not be allowing her to have a lung transplant due to the fact that she isn't old enough, which is discrimination. So by giving her the lung transplant, justice was upheld. So the historical context in this situation, the influencing factors in this case involve Sarah's age, which prevents her from getting a lung to save her life. And it is evident that Sarah was provided psychological support by her parents in this case. And the environment that this happened at was the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. So the main stakeholders include Sarah, her parents, the hospital this took place at, as well as the physicians and the nurses who were helping Sarah. Also, the hospital is broadly implicated because its reputation is on the line with this case and the outcome of this case. And also the court and the judge would be stakeholders, and their reputation would also be on the line with the outcome of this case. Other people who are broadly implicated are children who might benefit from a lung transplant from an adult. So basically the outcome of this case could change political laws and could help other children obtain lungs from adults, as well as the reverse, in that adults could receive lungs from children if they're suitable with their particular body. So the organizational and legal concepts. Obviously, I've talked quite a bit about the rule of the age limit on the transplant. So that was the main legal concept that came in play into this case. Also, the Hippocratic Oath should be considered here, in which physicians want to do the best for their patient. So they would be following this by giving Sarah the lung transplant using the adult lungs. Which that option would most likely be supported by a profession-based ethics committee if they were involved in this case. And it's also important to note that the hospital and the views of the physicians and the healthcare providers influence this case and what happened in this case as well. So the first alternative to this case is that Sarah does not receive the lungs and she continues to wait on the pediatric waitlist. So a pro of this would be a patient who is eligible for adult lungs would receive the lungs, and that there would be no rules that need to be bypassed. However, the Hippocratic Oath would not be followed, and Sarah's life would most likely be taken away, which would affect her, obviously, and her parents. Another alternative is that Sarah waits on the pediatric waitlist until last minute, and then if that pediatric lung does not come in, then she receives the adult lung transplant. So her life would be saved and the Hippocratic Oath would be maintained, and also we would be abiding by more rules and by then giving her the transplant right away. So those would be the pros. However, the cons would be that her health would deteriorate by increasing the waiting period when ultimately the same decision will be made in the outcome, which is the pediatric or the adult transplant. And also another con would there would be less set of adult lungs for eligible patients. A third alternative is that more extreme measures could be taken to find Sarah a set of pediatric lungs. So the pros of this would be no rules would need to be bypassed, Sarah's life will be saved, but the cons would be the hospital would spend more time and money, and also we may end up forcing a child or a family of a child to give up the child's lungs when maybe they didn't want to originally. So, in my opinion, the way that this case panned out would be the most suitable solution. So, by giving Sarah the adult lung right away, we are respecting her autonomous decision. We are increasing beneficence in this case by a lot, because we are doing what's right for Sarah, as well as her parents. And also the hospital would maintain its esteem as wanting to help its patients, and this would also set great implications for other similar cases where an adult lung may be beneficial to a pediatric patient, so it could potentially change political laws. But ultimately, it is just the best thing to do for Sarah if there is an available set of lungs that could save her life. It would just ultimately be the best decision with the highest pros and the least amount of cons. Thank you.